Hi, I'm Roslyn Sugarman. I am the head of the curatorial department at the Sydney Jewish Museum, and you've joined me here today in our archives, which is the place where we keep the museum's collection of memorabilia and artifacts that have been donated by the community. And I'm going to show you something that in fact no one ever gets to see because it's behind the scenes of the curatorial department. So let me first put on my gloves before I touch an object. And what we have here is stored in a lovely calico bag one of our volunteers made for us. We have a concentration camp uniform. Now it belongs to a man by the name of Vladimir Klunicki. He was not Jewish, he was Polish, but his daughter found a box when her father passed away of material, and she realized it was a concentration camp uniform, and she brought it to the museum. And during her lifetime, her father very seldom spoke about his experiences, and she couldn't tell us much about him. And in addition, all she did know was that because of what he'd been through during the war and suffered so much, his health was very poor, and he died at quite a young age. And what we're left with are two items from which we can look at and decode some information that will tell us not only about him, but about the experiences that he and others went through. So this is this man's concentration camp uniform, and the first thing you might notice is that not actually a uniform in that the pants and the jacket match each other. And this is very common. I mean, we're very familiar with seeing concentration camp uniforms that are made out of the striped material, and prisoners, even though you consider many of them had not committed any crimes, would wear a garment like this that was identifiable, so that if you leave the prison or the concentration camp or the labor camp, you'd be easily identified when you're outside. But at some point there were so many prisoners that in fact the authorities ran out of the uniforms, and prisoners were forced to wear garments that they were given that might have belonged to, for example, Soviet prisoners of war, or perhaps even any civilian clothing. And civilian clothing would be marked in some way. So if we take a look at this jacket that he was forced to wear, if you very carefully look at it, there's a residue of some stitching in the jacket where this man and others who might have worn it before him would have attached their concentration camp number that they were given. In addition, something that I found really fascinating, and apart from which one could look, let's just say, at the condition of the jacket to see that it's in very poor condition. It's dirty, it's got holes, it's very well worn and torn. But there's something in it that I find just intriguing. And this is what happens when you get an object at the museum. You have to look at it and see, what does it tell you? How does this object speak to you? What information can you gain by just looking, considering that we don't have much history or much information about the person to whom it belonged? And one of the first things that I noticed when I opened it up was that there was a secret pocket. It's quite large, but you can tell that it didn't come as an intrinsic part of the jacket, that someone had found a piece of fabric, a scrap perhaps, and stitched it by hand into the jacket. It's a little bit torn off now, but imagine if it was attached and fixed, that this person could have used his pocket to hide things or to store things so they don't get lost or stolen. And we know from listening to other survivors' testimony that that was a common occurrence, that if you found a scrap, that you could use it somehow to retain something on you. And so you can see this envelope or pocket attached. And in fact, from the inside, and one has to be so careful not to be tempted to pick at this, but this little residue of cotton that attached the concentration camp numbers in itself is really significant. I'm actually showing you could say an absence or a lack of something, but you can see very clearly at which point that would have been attached to his jacket. So when you have a look at the trousers that he wore, another fascinating thing for me is you look at the hem, and you can see that it's been put up, and with not an insult to any man, but this is not is not the handiwork of a skilled seamstress. This is a really rudimentary hem that's been done. It was either the previous owner was shorter perhaps or taller, and in some way this had to be altered or mended, because when you were given a concentration camp uniform, no one really cared or gave consideration to what size you were, and you were randomly handed out uniforms, sometimes way too large, sometimes way too small, and then prisoners with very little means available to them could literally alter in some ways to make it fit a little bit better. And so you can see the hem that he has, in this case, put up. I'll just show you a little bit closer. You can see that it's not the neatest hem, but it certainly does its job. And then when you have a look at the trousers themselves, they are extremely well worn, which, as we know, no one was given a few changes of clothes. So you had to have your one uniform that you sometimes wore all day, all night, slept in, worked in, and it obviously, the condition shows, speaks volumes, you could say, about what this person went through. I mean, very often you see dirt where, grease marks where you might have dirty hands and you might wipe them on your trousers. You see the holes, you see how it was amended or altered to fit again this little, I think you could probably clearly see that different pieces from another garment have been attached to this one just to make it fit. And so this is a very rare item in our collection. It is one of only a handful that we have. Most people got rid of them at the end of the war because they were dirty, filthy, lice-ridden. Many didn't want to be reminded of what they'd gone through. This is literally the only pair of concentration camp trousers that we have in our collection.